It's a pleasure to be here. You'll notice that I don't have a little clicky device in my hands. I don't even know what it's called. So you won't be seeing any wonderful photographs or clever, informative text or fabulous images on the screen behind me. It's not that I disdain technology. I don't. I'm at a TED Talk. I love technology. Technology, good. It's just that I'm not terribly adept at technology. Luckily, the thing that has always got my imagination going has not been in the realm of that future possibility that technology seems to inspire. It's always been back here in the past. And I think my one nod today to current terminology, I think I'm genetically encoded to find inspiration in history. My father recently retired as a professor of history for 40 years. Both of my grandfathers, one for a short period of time, one for a very long period of time, professors of history. So I come by it honestly. The question is, what is it about history that gets my imagination going and allows me to find fiction there? And whenever I give a talk like this, invariably someone in the audience always says, well, but history is so exciting on its own. History has all the best stories. There's intrigue and thrillers. Why do you even need to impose fiction onto that? And, you know, of course, my answer always is, you're right. History is inspiring on its own. It gets the job done without fiction. The problem is we really only know about 1% of history. And whenever I say that, the person says, what do you mean? We have academics, we have popular historians who go back and take a look and they clarify and codify that past so we can understand it and its totality so we can understand better how we have gotten to where we are. And I say, you know, that's true, but most of what they talk about are the big ideas, the big events, the big characters. And as we all know, most of history, 99% of history, is lived and thus made by ordinary people. People like you and me, no less extraordinary for the lives that we live, but we don't live them on the stage of history. We live them with history as, you know, our backdrop. And if we are going to look at history that way, then, you know, I've got to be able to find my kind of inspiration in that smaller, more intimate place. If novel writing is in fact just storytelling, then the heart of storytelling is finding a way to tap into the human condition, what it is that makes us yearn, why we seek out joy, what takes us spiraling into despair. And I suppose I could look at some of those big characters on that big stage and imagine what it would be like for them to understand the human condition. I suppose I could, you know, think of Napoleon after the Battle of Waterloo, and I could imagine him sitting there thinking, gosh, that didn't go well. I guess I should get in touch with Josephine. But for me, much more interesting is imagining the little sailor who managed to jump off one of the last ships before it was destroyed and swim to safety and live his own life. In fact, in a book I did a few years ago, I took 1927 Berlin as my backdrop at the very moment that talkies were invented, the very moment that image and sound came together. And you can't imagine how that technological innovation shattered and shaped the world in a completely new way. People looked at themselves differently. They looked at the world differently. And I suppose I could have, you know, looked at the studio heads and the technology itself and Al Jolson and the jazz singer, even though it was Berlin. And there's a little bit of that in the book. But much more interesting to me when I got the first idea was to think of a man, a character who comes back from the First World War And he survived the war simply because of new breakthroughs in medical technology. But in order to survive, he has lost half of his face and he has no ability to speak. Imagine that character placed against the backdrop of that moment when image and sound are coming together and his image is shattered and he has no voice to speak. Think about how profound that would be to understand the human condition in those terms. There is a raw quality to that. Now, of course, the question is, how do I find that man? It's easy enough to find Napoleon. I can find Napoleon anywhere. You can find Napoleon anywhere. Where do I find this man? And here's a little trick of the trade. It doesn't really matter whether he existed or not, whether he was real or whether he is just a part of my imagination. My responsibility is the same. My job is to make sure that he is viable for that moment in history, that he is real, that he can breathe there. And part of what I have to do is to imagine that time and that place as characters as well, so that this character can interact with time and place as characters so I can create something that is real and viable. It still forces me to ask, how do I create the foundation on which he stands? And here I do share some of the same techniques as the popular historians and the academics. I look at archives, I look at their work, newspapers. One of my favorite forms of inspiration is to read novels written at the time, for the simple reason that novels written at the time are the surest way that we can capture the voice of that moment. And if I am creating time and place as character, I have to give them voice. So I read those novels, I steal everything I can, I put it down here, and I begin to create. But there is one source for me when I am finding my creativity with this character that stands above the rest. One source that is sort of the holy grail for me. And sadly, that source is slowly disappearing. 100 years from now, someone who wants to do what I do and look back on our time and our place as character won't have access to this source. And as much as it's sad for future writers of historical fiction, I think it's equally sad for all of us because it's a fundamental way that we communicate. And I'm sure a number of you already guessed what I'm talking about. I'm talking about letters. Letters to me are the gold mine. And the simple reason that letters are the gold mine, it's the way we have always told our own stories. It's the way that we tap into the things that are most fundamental about ourselves. And I'm sure a number of you are saying, well, wait a second, diaries and journals, those are the ways that we can see what someone was really all about. And I would argue, yes, but diaries and journals are meant purely for ourselves. They're an internal source. Letters have always been something that we send out into the world. It's the way we present our own stories to everyone else, and for that reason, we have to be a little more sophisticated and a little more analytic in the way we tell our stories. And as I said before, if novel writing is storytelling, and storytelling is really just tapping into the human condition, then one of the most fundamental things that make us human is our ability, our desire to tell stories. That's what we are genetically programmed to do. When we want to educate, amuse, distract our children, we tell stories. When we meet other people in small groups, large groups, we tell stories. And while the oral activity of telling stories is profound, the act of sitting down and writing it forces us to process that idea differently, forces us to become more sophisticated storytellers. And we are losing touch with that. Even the way we talk about communication today is far more truncated than those wonderful, expansive sense that we get in our stories, in our letters. The very words themselves are truncated. We shoot people an email, we text, we tweet. There is a staccato sense to the way we talk about communication. But letters force us to think of it in a more expansive way. Think of my character in Germany shattered face, no voice, going into a movie theater and for the first time seeing a talkie. Think of him sitting down and the amazement, the joy, the wonder that he is experiencing. Then think of him going home into his one-room apartment, getting out a few pieces of paper and writing to his brother in Munich about this experience. Think of him processing that and trying to process that joy, that amazement, and that underlying despair that he must feel because he can't fully participate in it. Far more profound than went to new kind of movie, very cool, feeling sad, send. So, if today all of these talks are a way for us to inspire people to find their creativity and their imagination, then my gift to you is the next time you want to communicate with a parent, a child, a sibling, a friend, a colleague, sit down and write a letter and find access to your own storytelling. It's what makes us who we are. And as you do that, you will begin to see the world very differently. Yes, you can write a big, fat, juicy email too. That will work. It doesn't have to be paper. But you will tap into something that is tremendously profound. You will begin to tell more expansive stories, and you will begin to demand greater storytelling from the world outside of you. You won't so readily abide the soundbite from a politician or a news organization. You will demand larger stories because it's what makes us who we are. So please, go out, write letters, and find your creativity. Thank you.